I would love to see retailers thinking about less so seasonality, but more of products that are kind of evergreen and, you know, you keep the same colors and the same cut and pattern and style for multiple seasons, even multiple years. You're definitely starting to see that with some brands that there's less turnover in colors and I think that's one way to start to address some of the issues of oversupply. I think we're just going to be in this uncomfortable position where there's an oversupply that is also being driven by PFAS chemicals being also in everything, in addition to, everything left over from the pandemic.
I'm Meg Carney, an outdoor and environmental journalist, and this is the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast. Thank you for joining us so that together we can create a better outdoor space as we recreate. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the demand for outdoor gear skyrocketed, leading brands to ramp up their production. But as the dust settled and has continued to settle, it is becoming clear that the industry may have overestimated the long-term consumer demand. Now that we are left with an oversaturated market, constant sales cycles, and the looming question, what do we do with all this gear? To help unpack this issue, I'm joined by Megan Davin, the founder of Adventurous Threads. We'll explore what led to this oversupply and how it's affecting retailers and consumers, as well as what steps companies and individuals can take to shift the industry towards a more sustainable future. Megan Davin is a passionate outdoor enthusiast with over 18 years in the outdoor industry. Based in Vermont, Megan has dedicated her career to blending the worlds of customer service, sales, and marketing to help brands tell meaningful stories that drive connection and sales. She's also the founder and owner of Adventurous Threads, a Vermont-based mobile and online outdoor consignment business that provides affordable, high-quality gear to outdoor lovers. By keeping quality equipment in circulation, Adventurous Threads aims to make outdoor adventure accessible while reducing waste and promoting sustainable practices. Together, Megan and Adventurous Threads are dedicated to inspiring responsible, sustainable outdoor practices and connecting people to the outdoors in a way that fosters appreciation, understanding, and stewardship of nature. So thank you for joining me on the Outdoor Minimalist Podcast today. I'm excited to be joined by another Megan and also to discuss more about, this oversupply in the outdoor industry. But before we get to that, we must ask how you became interested in outdoor recreation and how it fits into your life now.
Hey everyone. So I became interested in outdoor recreation in college. I guess I could probably back it up and say I was a kid that was always curious about nature and played outside. But I didn't grow up skiing, biking, really, hiking, camping, any of that stuff. But I basically went to college and decided to move someplace where I could go skiing because that was what I was determined as a high school senior to do. And then from there, I went through a whole wilderness program, learning, instructing, and I dabbled in everything from rock climbing to skiing to hiking and snowshoeing and kind of kayaking, trying it all. And that over the years was basically how I kind of really fell in love more with the outdoors, which then has turned into a career. I basically started guiding right away in college through that. And so for the last 18 years, I've been working in the outdoor recreation industry in some capacity. So that's kind of how I got started.
And has that led to your creation of the Adventurous Threads, or how does that fit in?
Yeah, that passion it worked its way into Adventurous Threads because basically when I first started getting into the outdoors, everything, I had nothing. I didn't have the proper jackets, the proper gear. And the way that I kind of found my way in was through a local consignment shop in Burlington, Vermont called Outdoor Gear Exchange. And I was able to pick up some really great products at a great discount. And over the years, like I've now become friends with those owners. I worked there for a little while after college, and that was something that always kind of stuck with me to make it more affordable and accessible. And fast forward, that was one of the drivers to starting Adventurous Threads, was because that was one of the ways that I found my way into recreation was through more affordable gear.
That's awesome. I love a good consignment or secondhand shop for gear. I feel like there's a lot of things you can get there at a much lower price, of course. And so today we're talking a little bit about gear, as I mentioned already. And if people remember the COVID-19 pandemic, which feels like yesterday, but also 10 years ago at the same time for some reason, there was a huge spike in outdoor sport participation for a good reason because everything was closed and it was really the only option. And so, if we go back just that far and look at the COVID pandemic, how do you think that that kind of changed our consumer behavior in the industry? And like, what trends did you notice when people were trying to get gear?
Yeah, COVID-19 kind of created this unprecedented like surge in the demand of outdoor gear, because people were looking for safe ways to get outside. Being outdoors was one of the few ways that you could maybe see still at a distance other people. And it led to like record-breaking sales, especially in like biking, kayaking, and camping worlds. And the being outside was the safe place for everyone or a lot more people. And travel wasn't happening. Having big indoor events wasn't happening. So basically a lot more people turned to going outside and picking up new activities. And basically because of that, brands were like ramping up their production, hoping and kind of expecting that trend to last as well. There was also the supply and demand was kind of bonkers off the charts because we were dealing with also like a lot of supply chain issues and closings of factories based on being able to staff everything and people being sick versus not sick, at different points. And, it was one of those like crazy things that the outdoor industry just saw so many people getting into new sports, new activities, and, buying a ton of gear in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and now I feel like we're kind of seeing the opposite. I mean, the at the time of this recording, the economy is kind of shit. And everything is expensive. People are really struggling, which might play a role into that. But also, like, we are pretty much back to normal because it's been almost 4 years now, 3 years. I don't know. It's been a while. It's been a couple of years. And so I think that outdoor industry is kind of seeing like the opposite. Like they have all of this equipment, all of this gear, and there might be other things that have influenced and played a role in that oversaturation of goods. And so before we talk to like the fact that there is too much stuff right now, are there other things that you feel like have influenced this oversupply?
I think one of the things that influenced the oversupply was, in some level, kind of a greediness of like all these people are demanding our products. And when it was unavailable, it kind of created this false sense of demand. The supply wasn't there, but the demand was. And when the supply, kind of caught up, it all sort of leveled out and like now that's leading to everybody kind of struggling to manage inventory. There was one brand I actually knew of that during the pandemic, the one of the owners, who was a friend, was just super insightful and was just like, everyone's ramping up and trying to produce more and order more. And he was just like, this isn't going to last. Like, we will order some more products, but not go bonkers because, you know, he at least had the foresight to be like, it's might not last in the way we expect it. And it was still like a medium small business. And they were basically like, we don't want to get stuck with this inventory if it doesn't last. And selling out is better than having all the excess inventory.
Yeah, that was probably a really smart move on his part or their part. And one other thing, of course, that we have to talk about is PFAS. Always, I always have to bring up PFAS. And it's a topic that our listeners care a lot about. So, another thing that I'm seeing a lot is as these brands are being forced to transition all of their like apparel, backpacks, tents, all of those textiles to be I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it. Without intentionally added PFAS, then they have all of this old equipment and these old pieces of apparel that are being like really dramatically discounted. And they have like another chunk of stuff that they can't really get rid of or sell in certain systems. So I guess I don't really know what my question is, but I just kind of want to talk about like that aspect of how we're kind of moving through the industry. Because once 2025 hits, when this episode will air, you won't be able to sell those things in California and some other states.
Yeah, I think, I operate a consignment business. So for me, it's something that is always on my mind. I still accept products that I know definitely have PFAS in them. Um, I have not personally gotten to the point where people are trying to intentionally offload those products through consignment to purchase something new. Um, I think there's a lot of interesting tensions in that realm. Some people would PFAS are bad, but some people are like, purchasing new gear, they don't always feel like is the answer. So some people I know are holding on to this gear just to kind of have it until the end of its life. Other people who you know might be have a different mindset are definitely offloading gear to purchase something new. And the interesting thing is like you notice right now with like all the suppliers, like people are blowing things out on like crazy sales. And I've started noticing, on new products, they say like that they don't have PFAS in the descriptions. And that kind of um, got me thinking because I was reading an article this morning about how used gear and consignment in general is like, it was an opinion piece. And this one person was like, it's kind of save the industry in some ways. And I don't know if I necessarily agreed with everything, but their whole point was like, so we're now labeling everything as does not contain PFAS, or at least some companies are. But like, why weren't we marking things that they had these chemicals in them in the first place? I think we're definitely entering a very interesting time frame of depending on people's values and wallet and ability to spend or not spend money. Um, it'll really be interesting to see. And then you might also get like, say, people who are super into getting a really good deal at a sale that won't care. And those might be the people that buy up everything that has is older and has PFAS and is getting blown out by companies as they try to adapt to new regulations.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to the next question of like, what are brands and retailers doing with this oversaturation of products that people aren't buying at like the standard price? And what are kind of the consequences for businesses offloading all of this excess, maybe at extreme discounts?
Yeah, I think the like businesses, that's exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to offload everything because they now have this oversupply, especially thanks to the pandemic and the shift in over purchasing and supply and demand kind of ebbing and flowing and leveling out, that like people are, I think, getting like very worried about needing to get rid of products. So you see things like continuously lowering in prices. I mean, I've never seen my inbox so just burdened with like sale prices and like 20% off, 20% off. And they run a 20%, business runs a 20% off sale. It goes off for one day and then like a day later after it ends, 20% off again. And that's definitely something I've historically not seen. That everyone's running what feels like continuous sales, and not everyone is, but I think the the impact is going to be very unknown. I think the size of the company will determine how they're able to absorb or not absorb, um, getting I'll say rid of product. Um, you know, I've noticed that some companies are now working with some of the larger like online consignment businesses, and like all their samples and some of their product is kind of going through another route, that they're basically selling it to other consignment businesses, or even like um off price markets like Sierra Trading Post.
Yeah, is that something that you ever see with your business is like a brand will dump products that they can't get rid of onto consignment shops? Like once it just kind of reaches that point of they ran all the sales that they could and it just needs to be replaced.
I have not seen that personally with my business because we're still pretty small and newish. But I have seen that with some other consignment businesses, and friends that have consignment businesses in different parts of the country, that they are sometimes approached by companies that are especially say local to them. Um, I have a friend that runs a consignment business in Colorado, and they're right outside of a major ski resort town, which has a bunch of, clothing and apparel companies. So I know they've been approached to see about selling the products that way.
Interesting. It's just kind of interesting how like consignment and secondhand and stuff is just kind of starting to be more integrated into that like general scheme of selling things in the industry. And I do want to talk more about that. But before that, I want to talk a little bit more about like the sales and discounts and kind of like the consumer perception around that. Because don't get me wrong, I love a good deal. I think everyone does. But at the same time, the entire premise of the show is to buy less things, right? And it's kind of annoying to me as the type of consumer that I am to like see a company have a constant sale, because at some point I'm like, okay, that's just your price. It's not actually on sale anymore. That's just the market price that you have for this item or this set of items. And so like how do you think that the sale aspect and having like too much and maybe transitioning too quickly and falling into the realm of, I don't want to say fast fashion, but some outdoor industry brands are fast fashion-y, and they run almost too many updates. And so they're kind of falling into this cycle.
Yeah, I think that's actually interesting, bringing up kind of the fast fashion side in some ways of the outdoor industry. Um, because a lot of companies, especially, it was kind of accelerated with the pandemic in order to reach new audiences, started producing new products that were maybe like more fashion and forward thinking, that to reach a whole different consumer, because those people were now entering the outdoor space in the outdoor industry, but would maybe not be drawn to the like super technical mountaineering um, apparel that brands kind of have based their whole history and existence on. Um, and actually, interestingly enough, Mammut just launched a marketing campaign where they were driving, I think it was over in Europe because they're based in Switzerland, like a billboard around, and it was basically like, like our home is in mountaineering, like we're a real mountain brand. And they were indirectly taking a jab basically at the North Face and Arc'teryx because they would drive it by those stores in town. This was the photo that I saw and then read an article about this. And, I think every company is kind of trying to figure out like, did we go too far in one direction or not in another direction? But yeah, I think it's been interesting to kind of see that in general. But you're also seeing a lot of brands um, creating their own secondhand markets as well. Um, I don't know if there's like many major brands out there at this point that don't have some sort of resale platform, trade in your old gear for a discount to get new gear type of program. And, it's just basically another strategy like having more fast fashion-y styles in addition to what was known as like a core market. Like there's basically everyone's trying to tap into all the different segments and like so you're seeing a lot of different pieces getting chunked up.
Yeah, and I mean, how does that fit into sustainability then? I guess would be my question for those brands, because if you are in this almost fast fashion design process, and then you say, oh, but we accept back our old goods. And a lot of times I've seen with those like sell back programs that they don't always go into whatever their secondhand market is. And so more than likely they're just being tossed. Like I don't think a lot of times they're actually being recycled because that's a huge infrastructure like investment, like a whole other process that you have to invest in as a company. And then like the secondhand thing, that's a whole other oversight or not oversight, but a whole other like thing you have to manage. And so it just seems like it's kind of like this vicious loop and it's not actually playing into truly sustainable practices and they're just like reacting.
Yeah, I think I view it as it's a form of greenwashing. Um, and some of it comes with like there is the intention to try to do something sustainable and try to have a solution, but then there's also the we're trying to talk to a certain audience as well who believes in that. So if we have this, they might like us more because we are, you know, practicing what we preach. A lot of outdoor organizations say donate a lot of, money and volunteer time to, conservation type of programs. And, people who might be really into that sense might also be like, oh, I like that they're, taking back some of their product and reselling it or recycling it or whatever, however they view it. But if you don't look into that fully in the process of everything, it can definitely not be as clear as you might think it is with what's actually happening to those products.
Yeah, and then that just puts more pressure on the consumer, which I feel like consumers are already doing like a lot of work in terms of if they want to align their shopping with their values. And so, how do you think that companies can kind of adapt in this current market of oversupply and focus more on those secondhand or consignment or sustainability options?
I think with kind of the oversupply, it's companies need to choose what their like true missions and values are. And I think taking the time to invest and do it well would serve everyone good. If they're kind of just half-assing it, certain people can definitely see through that. Um, I recognize there's no easy solution. There's no easy answer to all of this. And in the middle of that, you know, every so often you hear of like a lot of these even large companies having like massive layoffs, and it's like, okay, what department just got gutted? What product that they're putting out there no longer exists. I recently saw some brand, they sent out an email and they were like, we're relaunching our like buyback program. And I was like, I didn't even realize that they had like quietly shut it down for, I have no idea how long, maybe like a year or so. I knew about it when it launched, and then I saw this email that they relaunched it, and I was like, interesting that they had disabled it, but good for them that they maybe took the time and resources to figure out how to make it work better for them. But I think it's going to take a lot of having the right people in the right positions that are dedicated to seeing this through.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hmm. I feel like I could talk about this for a long time, but okay, so back to the oversupply issue in general. What would you like to see in the outdoor industry to address these factors? And how does that play into like your view of the industry moving in a more sustainable direction?
I think with the oversupply, I would love to see retailers thinking about less so seasonality, but more of products that are kind of evergreen. And, you know, you keep the same colors and the same cut and pattern and style for multiple seasons, even multiple years. You're definitely starting to see that with some brands, that there's less turnover in colors. And I think that's one way to start to address some of the issues of oversupply. I think we're just going to be in this uncomfortable position where there's an oversupply that is also being driven by PFAS chemicals being in everything, in addition to everything left over from the pandemic. There is no quick solution to this. I would love, at some point, the gear is either going to just end up sitting forever in a warehouse, or it's going to make its way through, secondary discount or consignment type places. I would love to see that products start filtering out, into other places. I'm just not sure how long that's really going to take to see it more fluidly.
Yeah, I am really curious, like entering 2025, how a lot of brands are gonna have to transition some aspects of things because, like you said, with the regulations and then other factors that all kind of compile into this one big mound of gear.
Yeah, and like retailers are facing like a super tough balancing act, because if the like main brand is blowing everything out online, but the little, mom and pop shop that bought it at a certain price doesn't necessarily have that luxury to blow out. But at the same time, in this day and age, to compete, you're matching prices. And, as long as it's the right model, color, size, etc., type of your standards to match prices that you see. But like, I'm I'll be curious to see how many brands like are kind of devalued in a sense from too much oversupply. It's just kind of this, like, we're in the continuous like off market pricing pattern right now. And retailers or big brands, based on their funding, in some ways will maybe be able to weather the storm. Others might end up closing, but I definitely think you see it's leading to like retailers being a little more cautious and a little more hesitant in their purchasing, because they're not oblivious to what's going on globally and bigger picture, and they're trying to watch their bottom line, as a small independent retailer.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Like how the smaller retailers are approaching that versus like an online market. Okay, well, I feel like there's a lot that we could continue to talk about, but are there any like final things that you wanted to add that you feel like maybe we missed?
I think the outdoor industry as a whole is kind of recognizing there is a demand for, sustainability and secondhand options. And like we're seeing many companies are kind of already like partnering with resale platforms or creating their own. Um, I think that's something we're going to continue to see kind of gaining traction in the next few years. Um, and then, these initiatives will help and strengthen kind of the relationships with those like more environmentally conscientious consumers overall. Um, I think that's one of the things that I've definitely been thinking about a lot. And, there's a lot of changes that kind of, need to happen to effectively like address the oversupply issues that there are. And there definitely needs to be a shift in mindset, and like changes to like how like big brands are like forecasting and ordering product, 2 years, 3 years in advance, depending on, what it is. Um, and then it's also, I think, up to the consumers to take the time, if there's something that they're passionate about, to do research and like thoughtfully support, brands that align with their personal sustainable practices and mindsets.
100%. I agree. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those like insights and observations through the conversation. I'm glad that we had time to chat. And if listeners want to learn more about you and maybe check out Adventurous Threads, how can they best do that?
Yeah, so adventurousthreads.com is our online marketplace, and Adventurous Threads on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Thanks for listening. And if you like what you hear, let me know. Leave a review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Instagram at outdoor.minimalist.book, on YouTube, or subscribe to our weekly newsletter at theoutdoorminimalist.com. For even more updates, other educational resources, and to help build an outdoor community with the shared goal to create a better outdoor space as we recreate.